In today's video, we're talking about the DualSense V2, how your PC is about to become a PS4, and is Microsoft and Sony making a car together? How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne, and this is PSReady, my channel all about PlayStation. If you want to keep up to date with everything in the world of PlayStation with a little bit of insight thrown in for good measure, this is the channel for you. So the first thing I want to talk about today is the DualSense V2. Best Buy Canada is the new Walmart Canada, and if you don't get that reference, during one E3, basically every game that was going to be announced leaked early on Walmart Canada leading up to the actual E3 showcases. The big one that leaked was Rage 2, and I'm sure it would have been a great surprise, but Bethesda and Walmart Canada leaned into the joke and it was kind of awesome. But the reason Best Buy Canada is the new Walmart Canada is because they have leaked the DualSense V2. There's product pages for this thing everywhere now, but basically all it's going to do is just take the current DualSense, the one that we have that comes with the PS5 Slim, the PS5 Original, the one we can pick up at any store on the internet right now, and it throws in an upgraded battery life that they say gets you an incredible 12 hours of game time, which, you know, if you compare that to other controllers like the Switch Pro controller, which has 40 hours of battery life, it's not that good. But if you compare it to like the DualSense Edge, which has, you know, somewhere in the range of 3 to 4 hours of battery life, it's a lot better. It's like a 3 times increase over the regular DualSense and DualSense Edge. I'm honestly of mixed opinions on this. I think it's good, right? Like, I asked for this in my 2024 things I want video that I did at the beginning of this year, because the one thing that I think everyone wants out of the DualSense is more battery life. If you look at all the features that the controller has, they pretty much nailed it. They've got cool adaptive triggers, they've got awesome haptic feedback, they toned down the light bar that you had in the DualShock 4, and despite the fact that my hands had to get adjusted to the DualSense, once they did, it is impossible to go back. I think that is de facto the best controller I've ever used, and to the point where on PC, I have no problem using the DualSense Edge completely wired, and I would never have done that in the past. Like, the controller is just that good. And the reason I'm like doing that is because it does not really work over wireless. Like, Bluetooth is fine, but you have to use Steam input. And then when you're playing games, it puts up like Xbox button prompts, and that really sucks. So yeah, when I play on my PC, I use it wired, and then it remembers my PS5 as its wireless connection, which is great. But the reason I'm obviously mixed on this is because they just released the PS5 Slim in November, right? Like, everyone who got a PS5 for Christmas or has had a PS5 since launch or picked up the brand new Spider-Man 2 edition DualSense limited edition controller, that's not this DualSense V2. I've used the regular DualSense that came with my PS5 Slim, and it gets the exact same battery life as my matte black one that I use on my PS5 Original upstairs. So I'm pretty positive that is not the version of the controller that came with my PS5 Slim. And if it is, then that's not really getting more battery life, and they're mismarketing it. So if they come out and say that, yeah, we retroactively made this available for sale and everyone actually got it with their Slim, I think they need a software update or something like that to unlock the true potential of that controller's battery, because from what I've experienced, it's about exactly the same. The game I experienced that the most with was Spider-Man 2. I played through that on my PS5 Slim with that controller, and I would just drain the battery, have to plug in my 9-foot DualSense Edge cord, which is like the only thing that makes that controller extra worth it, if you ask me. And yeah, the battery life has been about the same from my subjective opinion about the DualSense that came with my PS5 Slim. So going off the assumption that this is a new controller, that really sucks, right? Like, the PS5 Slim came out in November. They really should have included this upgraded controller with that model. I don't really know why they wouldn't have, other than they might have saw the complaints from people on the regular DualSense and said, all right, we're gonna go upgrade this thing, and then it was a super simple fix, like they just put a better battery in it. And if that's the case, they should have made this change a long time ago. They could have done this in the first year of the PlayStation 5, because as bad as the DualSense Edge battery is, people have been complaining about the regular DualSense battery life since the console came out. And I'm someone who actually has collected a lot of DualSenses since this thing came out. I have a couple custom editions. I have the white one, I have the PS5 Slim white one, I have the matte black one, I have the God of War Ragnarok edition, I have the Spider-Man 2 edition. I have way too many DualSenses, and the thought of having to replace even my matte black one because they're upgrading all of the different colorways to have this new battery in it. That's not really something I'm super excited about because the DualSense costs as much as a game. It's $70 for a brand new controller. It's hard because I want to praise Sony for doing this, right? Like, this is objectively a really good thing to do. Like, it's taking feedback that people have had for the DualSense since it came out, and they're directly addressing it with a brand new controller. But this is a situation where I feel like it would be really cool of them to say, hey, I know a lot of people bought a PS5 Slim around Christmas this year. They bought it at launch. That is our new model that we're going to support with new plates, because we did see the Deep Earth collection transitioned over to the new 4-plate model over at CES just this week. I don't think they're going to do it, but I think it would be awesome if they said, hey guys, we know that you all just bought PS5 Slims for Christmas. This was a really big year for us in terms of PS5 sales. We couldn't get the regular DualSense upgraded in time for the launch of that console, which we wanted to do before the Christmas season, obviously. So we're going to have some trade-in program where you can send in your white DualSense that came with your PS5 Slim, and we're going to swap out your original DualSense for a brand new DualSense V2, right? Like, I wouldn't want to pay shipping, but I definitely would do a trade-in program like that. And it's kind of like, it's tough. They're not going to do that because that's just going to be an expensive fix for them. And if you look at the Steam Deck is another example, they just did the upgrade on that, and there were a lot of people who bought Steam Decks right before the Steam Deck OLED was announced, and Valve kind of was cool about it. They said, hey, we can cancel your orders or you can return it and swap it out for an OLED if you pay the difference in cost, of course. But I don't know. I think this could have been handled a lot better by Sony, and the whole plate system could have been as well. It's really weird that the PS5 Slim's new plates didn't get announced. They were just there at CES, and as far as I can tell, there's still no announcement. Like, Sony hasn't come out and said, hey, we're making the Deep Earth collection. It'll be available on this date for this price. They just threw out the PS5s on a big shelf with the plates on there, and when people were asking about it, they were like, we have nothing to announce at this time. And it's a little extra weird because they handled the launch of the PS5 Slim the exact same way. Like, back in the day with the PS4 Slim, they announced it, there was a trailer, they said it's going to be available on this day, you can pre-order it now and then get it when it comes out. But with the PS5 Slim, they never really announced a release date for that console, and then eventually, just the night before it came out, you had a rumor that said it was going to show up at GameSpot and Amazon, and that's what happened. I was able to get a pre-order in, but even then it got even weirder because you could only get a bundle with Spider-Man 2 or a bundle with Modern Warfare 3, and it was only the disc model. And I don't even know when they eventually launched the digital model or if you can pick it up at this point, but the only option you had at launch, which they didn't even announce, was a bundle of the disc drive model. Last year, after the disastrous showcase Sony had, we heard rumors after rumors from people who are generally right that there was going to be a second showcase by the end of the year. That has not materialized. So what I'm really hoping here is that whatever this new rumored showcase or state of play is A, that it's real. That's the first thing. I really hope it's real. The second thing is that it's a showcase instead of a state of play. Like, just at the basic level, they have to cover 2024 release dates, they have to talk about these new plates, they have to talk about the DualSense V2, and they have to eventually talk about the PS5 Pro, because that thing, I am positive, is coming out by the end of the year. And if everything is to be believed, they're going to be going up against the Switch 2, because all of the rumors around that say it's coming out in September of this year. So Sony, I love what you're doing. I love that you're upgrading the battery life. I love all these games that I've been getting on my PlayStation 5. I just want to hear about it from you and not Reddit. The second news topic I have for you guys today is about how your PC is literally about to become a PlayStation 4, because the PlayStation 4 emulator is coming together a lot quicker than the one that we had for PlayStation 3. And it looks like it's actually working pretty well, because I found out about this through a Twitter account called PC Focus, and they have the safe menu, like the boot menu you used to get if you held the PS4's power button long enough. Like, if you shut it all the way down and then held the power button when you turn it on, you could go into safe mode. That is running on a PC via this emulator, which is really what you need to be able to play games on your PC. The games that I think people really want to try out on PC are Bloodborne and Ghost of Tsushima. Bloodborne more so because there's no port, and Sony has kind of abandoned that game on the PlayStation 4. Even if you run it in the PS4 Pro mode on the PS4 Pro or the PS5, it doesn't run all that well. There's frame pacing having issues. It's not a locked 30 frames per second. The resolution is super low. So being able to run that through an emulator on the PC, you could increase the resolution and hopefully be able to run it at 60 frames per second. I don't think you could ever really run it higher than that because all Soulsborne games from Software have a problem where they don't really run right over 60 FPS, but being able to run Bloodborne at the very least a constant 60 FPS, I think that's what people want out of that game to begin with. I honestly have no idea why Sony's abandoned it to the point that they have, because regardless of whether or not From Software made it, it is a Sony owned IP. It's a Sony game. It's first party in the sense that they own everything about it, and it's second party in the sense that a third party developer developed it for them. But I feel like Sony could get Bluepoint or any of these other developers they have. Specifically Bluepoint would be great because they've made Demon's Souls, which is a remake of the very first Souls game. They could get them to go in and kind of just patch it up and fix it. And the only reason I can think of as to why they haven't is because they're working on either a remaster or a sequel that comes along with a patch on the same day, because that's the best way to get people excited for a Bloodborne sequel, right? You announce the sequel and you say, also, there's a PS5 port ready to go right now. We have a patch for the PS4 mode, and we have a patch that makes it run better on the PlayStation 5. And from the limited experience I have, the PS3 emulator that was finalized last year, that actually works really well on PC as well. So even if there are a few little issues with this PS4 emulator, the amount of people working on it and the good work they're doing means that it probably won't take too long for it to get to a point where it's not only stable, but a better experience playing on PC than the actual PlayStation 4. I know for my friend Mr. Matty Plays, who has a second channel called Retro Rebound, that would be a huge boon for him because he goes back and plays a ton of PS4 and PS3 games, and being able to directly capture them at higher resolutions and higher frame rates on PC, that would be really good for B-roll. But beyond that, it's just really fun going back and playing these games at higher resolutions and frame rates, right? Like when you remember them in your head, you remember them running and looking awesome, but then when you go back and they're not patched to run well on the PlayStation 5 or PS4 Pro, you kind of remember that like games have come a long way since that generation, and playing them at lower frame rates and resolutions kind of just messes up the memory that you have of those games, or at least that's my experience. And the third news story I have for you guys today is all about the PlayStation Car. Yes, this thing was announced last year at CES. It's called the Afeela, and it's an official partnership between Sony and Honda. And at the time, people were kind of like, is this something that's ever going to come out? But Sony seems really committed to it because they brought it out on stage this year again with some pretty major updates. So it is an electric car, right? Like obviously that's the new big thing that every tech company is chasing. Apple is rumored to be working on a car. You of course have stuff like the Tesla out there and the Rivian. Like electric cars are a real thing, but getting one from Sony, who has a vast network of PlayStation developers, that could actually be pretty cool. And they were connecting it with their PlayStation developers on stage. But they also drove it out on stage using a DualSense controller. And I don't know, it's just bizarre seeing an actual full-on car that's eventually going to be sold to consumers if everything goes well, being driven by a PlayStation 5 controller. Like, I don't think it would ever get to the point where you would just keep one in your glove box. So if it's parked or something like that, you could get a camera view on your phone and drive it over to you from a parking lot. And I also think it's cool that they're getting Polyphony Digital involved in making some of the like heads up display stuff or like the UI of the car, because they make Gran Turismo. They've had a lot of experience over the years making well-designed HUDs for racing games, which are just full-on translations of what you see on the dashboard of your car, like the RPM and the speedometer and everything like that. And they also showed off some cool AR games that you could play. Like it was an empty street and it showed like a big monster through the windshield, like in the middle of the street, and you had to like kind of dodge giant asteroids. Now, obviously you couldn't do that on a regular old road, but if they set up some place where you could go and have an open track to try this out, that would be pretty cool, right? Like it reminds me of VR or the new stuff you can do with the Oculus Quest 3. But the most bizarre thing about this car is that not only is it a partnership between Sony and Honda, they've added a third company into the mix, which is Microsoft. And if they're already working in video game elements to this car on the PlayStation side, it's easy to think that if they're working with Microsoft in some way, they could also start working in Xbox games, and then we'd get to a future where the best gaming system is just your car, because it can play PS5 games or eventually PS6 games when this thing actually comes out, and Xbox Series X games. And that kind of goes hand in hand with Xbox's whole philosophy they're working on now, which is getting as many games as possible on as many platforms as possible. But it really seems like Sony and Honda are actually committed to making this thing a reality, and it was pretty cool seeing it driven on stage stage with a DualSense controller.